Alright, so check this out. I either witnessed this girl's own personal time slip, or she has a doppelganger. A while ago, I was riding on a city bus, sitting in the middle section facing the back. At some point, a young woman in her 20s wearing headphones appeared from behind me and took a spot in the standing area right in front of me. She was loaded with shopping bags and a backpack, but didn't sit down, which was kind of strange because the bus was almost empty. She stood there for about 15 minutes, talking non-stop on her phone. Eventually, I watched her head to the back door, step off the bus, and walk away. I sighed, thinking, finally, some quiet. About 10 minutes later, after a few more stops, bam! Out of nowhere, that exact same girl, same bags, same headphones, still talking on the phone, appeared from behind me again and took the same standing spot that she had occupied before. It was like I was watching someone respawn at a checkpoint in a video game. Same spot, same conversation even. Same everything. I just sat there, stunned. Shortly after that, my stop came up, so I didn't have much time to process what I had just witnessed. But I have no idea how or why she pulled off that stunt. And honestly, I don't even think she realized it happened. How did two completely unrelated errands lead to the same door? On my daughter's birthday, my wife and I talked about picking up a balloon inflator that a friend had kindly offered us, but we never set a time and she never gave me the friend's address. So naturally, I completely forgot about it. Later that day, I wanted to get some plant pots to have my garden looking nice for the party. I searched Facebook Marketplace and found someone giving away 10 nice pots. We agreed on a price, and I set off to pick them up. I entered the seller's address into my GPS, and I drove to the house. For some reason, I was absolutely convinced that the house was number 22. I pulled up, knocked on the door, and to my complete shock, my friend answered. The same friend that I was supposed to pick up the balloon inflator from. She looked confused since we had never arranged a time for me to come by, and I was just as confused as to why she was answering the door. She was in the middle of a video call and told me to wait a minute. Meanwhile, I was standing there in complete disbelief. Still puzzled, I quickly asked, "Are you living with Lucy?" Lucy was the name of the person selling me the pots. My friend frowned, said, "Lucy? No. Wait a minute." I went back to my car, I pulled out my phone, and realized that the actual address was 26, not 22. Before I could say anything, my friend came outside with the balloon inflator and said, "I didn't know you were coming to pick this up. I hope it's useful. Say hi to your wife and enjoy the party." Then she paused. "Wait, why are you here?" I finally explained, "Look, I actually came to pick up some plant pots, not the inflator. I wasn't planning on getting it today, and I didn't even know your address." She just stood there, confused. Then I walked over to house 26, I knocked on the door, and guess what? Lucy was my friend's neighbor. There are over 100,000 houses in my city. Google Maps had no idea about the party, or the pots, or the inflator, and yet somehow, by a completely random mistake, I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be, even though I never planned on it. To this day, I'm still completely confused. I think time loops exist, and I think I got caught in one. Many years ago, I attended a training seminar for a new job at the Washingtonian. It's a large motel and conference center fronting I-270 in Gaithersburg, Maryland, just outside of DC. When I arrived, the parking lot was nearly full, so I had to park out near the freeway. As I stepped out of my rental car, I glanced toward the highway, and for some reason, my gaze locked on to an approaching car. It was a silver Porsche 914. I watched it intently as it passed and disappeared into the distance. I then caught myself wondering, why was I so focused on that car? I liked the model well enough, but it wasn't a Ferrari or anything ultra exotic. There was no reason for it to command my attention like that. Eventually, I just shrugged it off and went about my business. But the experience had been notable enough that over time, I found myself more aware of the Porsche 914. So much so that I eventually bought one. Fast forward to 3 years. I was driving my new silver Porsche 914 down I-270 to DC for a meeting. As I approached the Washingtonian, I noticed the motel sign up ahead, and then, as I passed by, I saw something that sent a jolt of electricity through my body. Standing in the parking lot, staring at my car, was me. I was watching myself drive by. I knew it was me. There was no doubt. It felt like touching a live wire. For years, I'd never understood why that moment had stuck with me, but now, I knew. It wasn't just a random car that I had seen 3 years earlier. I had been watching my own future self drive past. Shaken, I had immediately gotten off the freeway at the next exit and looped back to the motel. When I arrived, the parking lot was almost empty, and there was no sign of me anywhere. I had missed my past self, just as my past self had watched me disappear 3 years ago. Some kind of strange, casual loop had connected my past to my future. Not long after that experience, my Porsche almost got me killed. I was driving on a rural highway at night when suddenly I was hit with an overwhelming smell of gasoline. Within seconds, the passenger compartment lit up and the engine was on fire. And if you know the 914's design, then you know that the engine sits right behind the driver's seat. I had no time to think. At 40 miles an hour, I bailed out. Literally, I jumped from the car and I hit the pavement. I rolled, scrambled to my feet, and I watched as my beloved Porsche exploded. The fuel tank went up in flames, and the magnesium wheels and transmission case ignited like fireworks. It was a hell of a show. A couple of weeks later, I received a recall notice from Porsche. Turns out the fuel injector lines had a defect. They could crack and leak fuel directly onto the engine, which is exactly what happened to me. Insurance covered the loss, and in the end, I used the settlement to buy another one, because, how could I not? Did I experience a reality shift that erased my past? Years ago, I lived a completely different life, and then I ended up here. Like that life was nothing more than a dream. It wasn't a normal dream. I didn't feel like I was watching a movie in my sleep, catching bits and pieces of another existence. I lived it. I fell in love. I was married to someone who doesn't exist in this life. And I had memories and experiences and a full history. Then, just as I was waking up, I remember thinking, no, I don't want to leave him. He won't understand why I'm gone. And suddenly, I end up here, in a bed, in this life. At first, I could remember everything, but then, as my mind adjusted to this reality, the details started to fade. I forgot what his parents looked like. I forgot our first date. I forgot my favorite restaurant. And I laid there and cried, because I wasn't just waking up from a dream, I was mourning someone that I deeply loved and I knew that I would never see him again. It felt like that world was being erased. I didn't want to forget what he smelled like. I didn't want to forget his voice. And I didn't want to forget us, but I did. I could feel the awareness of that life being deleted, chipped away, and replaced with this one. In this life, I'm also married, and I love him too, but they're not the same person. And even now, I still think about my husband from the other world, and I really just hope he's okay. If this was just a dream, why was it so vivid? Why did I grieve as if I had lost somebody real? And why did it feel like I had actually lived an entire lifetime, only to wake up in a different one? Was it a parallel universe? A past life? A glitch in my matrix? I don't know. But I know what I felt, and I still don't understand it. Was I supposed to die on that mountain? About 3.5 years ago, I was hiking on the Isle of Skye near the summit of Bla Behind. The wind was picking up and the terrain was getting treacherous. The last half mile was nothing but massive boulders requiring full-body climbing. It was too difficult to continue to use my walking sticks, so I set them down on a flat ledge thinking I'll just grab them on the way back. I pulled myself up onto a rock ledge when suddenly, a deep, grinding sound. The boulders above me shifted. They were falling, and I had no time to react. I don't remember moving, but the next thing I knew, I was standing to the side on a grassy patch that I hadn't even noticed before. And from that new position, I watched. Massive boulders came crashing down, right where I had left my walking sticks, right where I should have been standing. I think I should have died, but I didn't. The icy chill that I felt in that moment wasn't just from the wind. I could see the reality where I didn't make it. I could feel the weight of those boulders crushing me. I should have never made it out. If I had been just a second slower, I would have never met my kids. So what happened? Did I shift timelines? Or did I experience a glitch in reality? Or did some version of me actually die there, becoming just another tragic hiking statistic? Even now, I don't have an answer, but I'll never forget that moment. I experienced 2 glitches years apart, but I think they're connected. Yesterday, I left a comment on this subreddit about a time loop glitch that I experienced 8 years ago. Then I remembered another glitch that I posted about from 3 years ago. And that's when I realized they had something really strange in common. This might get a little bit long, but I'm gonna try to keep it as short as possible. The first glitch. When I was 15 or 16, my friends and I had this place that we called The Spot. It was a huge sand dune overlooking the ocean and the skyline of our beach town. The nearest parking was over an hour's walk away, and being on the dunes was actually illegal due to conservation laws. But we were dumb teenagers, and as much as we respected the land by not littering or damaging anything, we still broke the rules to go there. One night, my best friend and I were making the long walk to the spot, smoking along the way. At one point, I looked to my right, inland, and noticed 3 condos standing alone in the landscape. This was rare to see, especially in touristy Florida. I then turned my head to the left, toward the ocean, and saw a heron standing on one leg in the water, with a plane gliding behind it in the distance. I took a deep breath of salty air and I thought about how beautiful it was to live there. Then, about 5 minutes later, we were passing by the same 3 condos. I looked towards the water and the same heron, same plane. I thought, okay, weird. A few more minutes passed, and then it happened again. Same condos, same heron, same plane. I was starting to freak out, but I wasn't about to say anything until my best friend suddenly broke the silence. "Dude, I swear we've passed that bird 3 times now." Now we were both really freaked out. She joked that we were in some sort of time loop, and then we saw it 2 more times. At this point, we didn't know what to do, so we just kept walking. Finally, we stopped and turned around. In the distance, miles away, were the lights of the 3 condos. We had somehow covered all that distance while not moving at all. It didn't make any sense. In the moment, we just laughed it off, still unsettled, and eventually made it to the spot where we smoked and tried to forget about it. Fast forward 5 years later. This is the second glitch, and I still think that these are somehow related, but you tell me. A new restaurant had opened up behind the place where I worked. We shared a little outdoor space, and we'd take breaks together. I had even eaten there with my neighbors. The restaurant was on a cute little downtown street called Canal Street, lined with shops and restaurants. One morning, I was driving down the street with my boyfriend. It was gloomy, the streets were empty, and as I reached the end of the street, I glanced to my left and I saw the restaurant. But this made no sense. The restaurant was supposed to be at the front of the street to my right. Confused, I turned to my boyfriend and I asked, "Why do they have 2 locations on the same street?" But he had no idea what I was talking about. I sat there in the street, staring at it for at least 30 seconds. Finally, I looped back around to the front of the street and I found the original location exactly where I remembered it. I pointed it out to my boyfriend, but he had no memory of our conversation from just a minute ago. So I drove back to the end of the street to show him the second location, and it was gone. In its place was the same empty buildings for lease that have been there for years. I circled the streets several times trying to make sense of what I had seen, but everything was back to normal. And here's the kicker. The name of that restaurant was called The Spot. And you can look it up right now. It's The Spot in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. The only 2 concerning glitches that I've ever experienced both involved places called The Spot. That can't just be a coincidence, right? What are the odds of losing something and then having it returned like this? Back in university, we had to take a bus into the nearest city for outings. Many of us bought annual bus passes, which had our photos on them to save on fares. One Christmas, a group of us took the bus into the city to listen to some carol singing at the cathedral. We got off the bus and walked 20 minutes to the cathedral. We stayed for about an hour, then we walked the 20 minutes back to the bus stop. As we arrived at the stop, my friend suddenly realized that she had lost her bus pass. Panic set in. We turned around and walked another 20 minutes back to the cathedral to search for it. No luck. Accepting defeat, we walked another 20 minutes back to the bus stop for the 3rd time that night. When we returned, there was a long line, and we saw the next bus pulling in. As we stood in line, still talking about the missing pass, I happened to look up at the top deck of the bus, and that's when I saw someone looking down through the window, holding something. Something small and rectangular. Something familiar. I looked at my friend and then back at the person on the bus, and they were holding up her missing bus pass. We both nodded frantically, and the person opened the window, dropped it down to us, and sure enough, it was her pass. What are the odds? We had taken that exact same bus from earlier, despite dozens of buses running that night. Someone found the lost bus pass and didn't just ignore it. They happened to be looking out the window at the exact moment that we were talking about it, and I happened to look up at them at that precise moment. We couldn't believe our luck. Out of all the things that could have happened, somehow, everything just aligned perfectly. It still blows my mind to this day. How did we survive this car crash that should have ended very differently? Was this a glitch, a parallel universe jump, or divine intervention? Let me know what you think. About 2 years ago, my friends Mary, Laura, and I were heading out on a trip for Mary's 21st birthday. Mary had always had this unshakable feeling that she wouldn't live to see 21, and she was also extremely Catholic. We left mid-afternoon on a Friday, so the roads were busy. At every single stop, Mary prayed with her rosary in hand and sprinkled holy water on us and around the car. She was already tense while driving. The heavy traffic made it almost impossible for her to switch lanes. At one point, a car going at least 85 miles an hour cuts us off. And just moments before, Laura and I had been looking behind us, trying to help Mary switch lanes. We told her, "It's no good. There are too many cars coming." Then, chaos. Mary loses control of the car. We start spinning over and over until we slam into the guardrail, and then it's silence. We step out of the car, shaken but unharmed, and we realize that something is very, very wrong. The highway is empty, like barren, and this was 5 p.m. on a Friday. Minutes ago, the road had been packed, cars speeding past us in every direction, and now, not a single vehicle in sight. It made no sense. None of us knows what happened, but the feeling in the air was just, off. A heavy, uneasy sensation, like reality itself had just glitched. Mary was convinced that we had died and ended up in an alternate reality. As I said before, she had always believed that she wouldn't live past 21, and yet, here she was. Driving a Mini Cooper on a busy highway, spinning out like that. We should have been hit, but somehow we weren't. To this day, we can't explain what happened, and honestly, I don't think we ever will. An inquisitive person in the comments asked, "What happened next? Did the highway stay completely empty until the tow truck came hours later?" And the OP responds with, "After we got out and crossed the highway, the cars resumed. There was like 3 minutes where there was no cars on the road at all." Somebody said that they simply quantum immortality'd into this timeline, which, if you don't know what that means that they actually did die in that particular timeline in that crash, but their bodies and their consciousness jumped or were transported to this timeline in order to keep living. Quantum immortality. Somebody else suggests that maybe it was Spider-Man that saved them. Could be either one. Does our apartment make objects vanish and then reappear in impossible places? My partner wears blue light glasses in the evening to help her prepare for sleep. One night, on a whim, we decided to go out after she had already been wearing them. She was standing in the living room near a spot with no furniture, no rug, just open space. As she put on her tote bag, she took off her tortoiseshell pattern glasses and dropped them inside. I watched them go in, and she was certain that she had put them there. We walked 3 feet to the door when she paused to double-check her bag. I don't know, she said something just didn't feel right. She rummaged through it and then dumped everything onto the floor to be sure. And immediately, we realized that something was missing. The thing she was looking for? It was there, but the glasses that she had just put in there, completely gone. They should have been right there, either in the bag or on the floor where she dumped everything, but they weren't. We searched the entire area, but the glasses had vanished. Time passed, and then one day, we decided to go through the shoe rack that sits by our front door. I lifted it up, and there they were. The missing tortoiseshell glasses sitting on the carpet behind the shoe rack. There was no way that they could have ended up there. They weren't near the door when they disappeared. They weren't near the shoe rack when she dropped them into her bag, and the bag wasn't dumped anywhere close to that spot. They should not have been there. But somehow, after months of being gone, they reappeared in an impossible location. And this isn't the only time that something like this has happened in our apartment. Objects move, things vanish and then reappear, and now we're wondering, will this continue after we move? Or is it just something weird about this space? I guess that remains to be seen. Am I stuck in a time loop, or is this a sign that I need to change something? Every time I drive through Ravenna, Ohio, which is very often, there he is, again. This man, who isn't homeless but likely lives in some type of government housing near downtown, somehow crosses my path every time I drive through. And I don't just see him walking, he literally steps out in front of my car. Not always at a crosswalk, not always at a stoplight, not even in a place where you're supposed to cross. It happens everywhere. On main roads, side roads, on random turns. At first, I thought maybe he recognized my car, but he does it even when I'm driving the truck with tinted windows. There's nothing distinctive about this truck either. There's no stickers on it, there's no standout features or anything, and yet, he still does it. I used to work at a Circle K, and he came in as a customer a few times. Talking to him was difficult because, honestly, he's not all there. Or maybe he is, I don't know. He's known for his wild rants, and he approaches people at gas pumps rambling about religion or complete nonsense. Customers would come in talking about him, usually laughing it off because everyone in town seems to know him, or at least know of him. I actually found some of the things that he said interesting. I liked him enough to give him a nickname, Doubloon. One time, Doubloon came into Circle K and told me that he had a doubloon worth a lot of money. I played along. Another time, he claimed that he was going to sue Longhorn Tobacco because he invented the word Longhorn and they stole it. Classic doubloon. But back to the point. Sometimes, it feels like he just appears out of nowhere. I'm very observant, yet I never see him walking before he suddenly steps into my path. The other day, I pulled out of the bank drive-thru, turned left, and stopped at the traffic light. Before the light even changed, there he was, stepping in front of my car. Again. I've even had moments where I've thought, one day, I'm gonna hit this dude. And it's not just him, there's another guy. The man who runs the laundromat. I never see him at the laundromat. I only ever see him at Giant Eagle, standing right in front of the registers. 80% of the time that I'm shopping there for groceries, I run into him. I've never been to any other laundromat in town, and I don't even regularly use laundromats. So I can't help but wonder, if I had never gone to his laundromat, would I ever see him at Giant Eagle? I see these repeating patterns, and honestly, it's hard to ignore. I know my life has been one paranormal episode after another. I should be used to weird things happening by now, but this is different. Ever since I had that past life regression therapy at 12 years old, my life has never been the same. So here's my question. If this really were a simulation, and certain people were repeating my life, crossing my path over and over. What does it mean? Am I on the right spiritual path? Or am I stuck in a loop, needing to change something? If I start doing things differently, like pursuing my own business, making new choices, will they stop appearing? Would they stop crossing my path if I was finally where I'm supposed to be? Because right now, I feel like Jim Carrey in The Truman Show. I'm not schizophrenic, but I am a little bipolar. And when I don't understand something, it pisses me off. So even if you don't have an answer, let me know. Have you ever experienced anything like this? The Four of Hearts incident. This story is about two brand new unopened decks of playing cards. I'll call them Deck 1 and Deck 2. And they are identical in the sense that they both have the same casino logo on the card covers. Both decks were boxed and wrapped individually in brand new shrink-wrap plastic, and they had been in my drawer for many months. One Friday night, we were going to a friend's to play poker, and we needed a deck, so I grabbed one of the brand new decks, deck number 1, to use and to play with. I left the other identical new deck with the wrapping still on it in the drawer. We realized partway through the night that one card was missing from the 52 deck. Very strange, considering it was a brand new deck that we had just unwrapped that night. We searched all over the playing table area and in between the chairs in case it was accidentally misplaced or dropped by one of us while playing, but we could never find the card. We stopped the game entirely to determine that the missing card was indeed the Four of Hearts. At this point, I put my incomplete 51 card deck in my pocket, and we continued the poker night with another friend's deck of cards. Later that evening, on my way home, in my car ride, I pull out the deck from my pocket, and now the Four of Hearts is back in the deck. I held the Four of Hearts card in my hand in the car, and the card had reappeared. My friends and I had a chuckle, but we all commented how weird and spooky that already was, and if the story ends here, then it's really no big deal, right? Well, I get home, and I sheepishly chalk up the strange evening to my friends and I just being incompetent folks who can't find a simple card in front of our eyes. I laugh at myself, I shuffle the deck, and I put the deck, which is still number 1, back into its light cardboard box, and I throw the deck of cards into my drawer to go to sleep. At this point, it's now a complete deck of 52 cards. I wake up the next morning, and the incident was still bugging me just a little bit, so I open the drawer and I pull out the deck, deck number 1, and again I count 51 cards. One card was missing. I count it again, still 51 cards. At this point, I flip over the cards to try to find the Four of Hearts. I look in the box, and it's still missing. I had this feeling in my gut that I've never really felt before. This sense of disbelief mixed with a sinking, what the F bewilderment. I calmly put the deck down, and to this day, I'm not sure what compelled me to do what I did next. But I picked up the second brand new, still shrink-wrapped deck of cards, deck number 2, in the same drawer. I slowly unwrap and open this new second deck. I flip it over to see all the cards, and in a new, pristine deck of cards, all cards are in order as we know. On top was, of course, the Ace of Spades, the King of Spades, and the Queen of Spades, and so on. I proceed to slowly thumb through this second brand new deck that I just literally opened myself and unwrapped the shrink wrap from. As I get to the Hearts section, the cards jump from the 5 of Hearts to the 3 of Hearts. One card was missing, the 4 of Hearts. I was numb at this point, and for the first time, I asked myself out loud if I was dreaming this, but it doesn't end here. I proceeded to thumb through the rest of this second new deck face up, and at the end of the deck, the last card in a brand new deck of cards was the Four of Hearts. Out of order from the rest of the new deck, which was in perfect order, except for this one card. This was 20 years ago, and to this day, my friends and I still can't explain what happened that night. If anyone has any similar stories or has any hypothesis, please feel free to comment. I need to know if this was a time slip, a doppelganger, or a glitch. When I was 20, I was dating a guy who had just bought a small motorcycle to get around the city. He lived in a 4-family building with garages underneath. One morning, after I had spent the night, I had to wake up at 4 a.m. for work. As I was gathering my things, I suddenly heard his motorcycle start. I looked out the window, and I saw someone pulling out of the driveway on his bike. Immediately, I tried to wake him up to check on it, but for some reason, he wouldn't get up. That morning at work, I ran into a coworker whose best friend lived directly below him. When I told her what happened, she said, "Yeah, I heard it too, and I saw him right away." So I know it wasn't just me. Someone else saw this happen. Since this was before cell phones were everywhere, I spent the morning calling the place, but he wasn't answering. Finally, he called me from work, not realizing that I had been trying to reach him. I immediately asked if he had checked on his motorcycle and called the cops, and his response? He said, "What are you talking about? No one's touched my bike. I rode it to work." Wait, what? I reminded him about how I had tried to wake him up, but he didn't remember it at all. And sure enough, when he got home, the motorcycle was exactly where he left it. Two people, my coworker's friend and I, clearly saw someone ride away on his motorcycle, and yet somehow it was never moved. So what the heck did we see? How did I hear it fall before it actually fell? This isn't the craziest glitch story, but at the time, it felt deeply unsettling. My bathroom is L-shaped and pretty small, so if I'm at one end of the L, I can't see around the corner to the other end. This detail is important. I was in the bathroom, just doing my business, when I heard, clear as day, my shower towel fell. I knew that sound. It was the distinct noise of a towel slipping off its hanger and landing on the floor. Now, that wouldn't have been weird in itself. Towels do sometimes slip off as they dry. It happens. So I didn't think much of it, and I went to wash my hands so I could pick it back up. But when I stepped around the corner, the towel was still hanging. Perfectly fine. At this point, I just kind of stood there, staring at it and confused. Maybe I just imagined the sound? But I don't typically go around perfectly imagining the sound of towels dropping for no reason. Still, if the story ended there, I probably would have just shrugged it off. But then, right in front of me, while I was watching, it actually fell. And not just that, but it made the exact same sound that I had heard just 2 minutes earlier. I mean, it was identical. It was like I had experienced a tiny time glitch, hearing a moment before it actually happened. Compared to other glitch stories, this one might seem minor, but the way it happened chilled me, and I won't be forgetting it anytime soon, because for that whole 2 minutes, I somehow already knew what was about to happen. How can multiple people keep entering a bank without ever leaving? This happened to my mom and me when I was 16 or 17 years old, sometime in the mid-90s. My parents needed to drive down to the bank so my dad could deposit a check and get a balance. They asked if I wanted to tag along, and I did. We pulled up and parked right outside the bank's only entrance. My dad got out of the car, walked inside, and my mom and I sat in the car, just chatting about school and current events. That's when I noticed a middle-aged man and his 8 to 10-year-old daughter walking in front of our car. They went up the ramp and entered the bank. Nothing weird about that. 30 to 45 seconds later, as my mom and I continued to talk, the same man and little girl walked in front of our car again. Same direction, same path, same ramp, back into the bank. I tried to brush it off, but then my mom suddenly stopped in the middle of her sentence. She turned to me and asked, "Didn't that man and that little girl just walk in front of us a minute ago?" I felt a chill and I said, "Yes, they absolutely did." And we both knew what we had seen, and yet there was only one entrance to the bank, and no one had exited. Another minute or so passed, and then they did it again. Same father, same daughter, walked right in front of our car for the third time and entered the bank. Now my mom was on the verge of a coronary, and I was completely speechless. There was no way that they could have walked into the bank 3 separate times without having walked out twice. Unless they had climbed out of the drive-through window, which was impossible, there was no logical explanation. By the time my dad came back and got in the car, my mom and I just sat in silence until we got home. 3 decades have passed, and my mom and I still claim this to be the strangest thing that either of us has ever witnessed. And, to make it even weirder, I grew up in a small town of only about 4,500 people. I had never seen that man or that little girl before, and I never saw them again after that. It was really, really peculiar. How can something physical and a photo of it vanish without a trace? Several years ago, I moved into a new place. Before unpacking, I specifically took a photo of where the cable line was coming out of the wall. I knew that once all of the furniture and boxes were moved in, I'd lose track of where it was. A few weeks later, after getting settled, I went to find the cable hookup and set up my internet and my TV, and it was gone. I searched everywhere. I moved everything around. I went around the entire perimeter of every room. I even checked rooms that I knew didn't have a hookup. And nothing. The cable line was just gone. Frustrated, I tried to find the photo that I had taken. It should have been right there in my gallery, but just like the cable hookup, it was gone. I searched my entire phone. I even checked through chronologically similar photos. I looked through metadata, and I tried to see if it was deleted or moved or renamed. Nothing. It was as if the photo had never existed, and with it, the cable hookup itself had also vanished into thin air. I never solved the mystery. In the end, I had to call the cable company and have them install new equipment, as if the hookup had never existed in the first place. To this day, I still have no idea what happened. Was it a glitch? A reality shift? Or did something simply erase both the cable and my proof of its existence? And why? Is this the weirdest case of a lost and found object ever? This happened about 5 years ago when I was with my then boyfriend, Alex. We were sitting on the couch, eating pizza, just hanging out. Alex was scrolling on his phone, which was resting in his lap. This detail is important for later, by the way. After we finished eating, we got up to clean up, and Alex asked me, "Hey, have you seen my phone?" I told him, "It was literally just on your lap. It has to be right there somewhere." But it wasn't. We searched everywhere. We checked the whole couch, looked under the pillows and under the blankets. We looked on the floor, even the kitchen, and some even weirder places. I even checked inside the pizza box, and it wasn't there. We looked all night, and then again the next day, but still, nothing. Eventually, we gave up and we got him a new phone because at this point his old one was just gone. A couple of days later, I was taking out the trash. I grabbed the pizza box, but something felt a little bit off. It was weirdly heavier than an empty box should be, like there was something inside. I opened it, and there it was, Alex's freaking phone. The same phone that we had torn the place apart looking for. This doesn't make any sense for several reasons. One, I had already checked the pizza box when we were searching for the phone. Two, we had leftovers. We opened and closed that box multiple times since the night the phone went missing. Three, there was zero chance that we wouldn't have seen it earlier. The only logical explanation would be if Alex had been pranking me. But that didn't add up. Alex was a terrible liar. He would have eventually spilled the secret to someone, and he had no real reason to pull this prank. He couldn't even afford a better phone, so he didn't gain anything by losing it. And he wasn't the type to pull a prank without it being some sort of big gotcha reveal moment. And yet, the phone disappeared. Then days later, it magically reappeared in a place that we had already checked. To this day, I have no explanation for what happened. Did we experience a glitch? Or a reality shift? Or maybe some weird time loop? I don't know. You tell me. I think this object slipped into another reality and then returned. This happened almost 2 years ago. At the time, we had just completed a total remodel of our bathroom, but we kept the same toilet, and after the remodel, it suddenly started running constantly, then flooded the floor while we were out for the day. So, I picked up a repair kit, and my husband got to work on fixing it. He was almost done with the repair when he asked me to hand him the nylon nut that goes on the bottom outside of the tank. No problem. I went to grab it from where we had laid out all the parts, but it wasn't there. We searched everywhere, and you can guess, we searched under the vanity, behind the toilet, across the black and white tiled floor, where a white nut should have been easy to spot. We even looked out in the hallway in case one of us had accidentally kicked it out there, and we even swept the entire floor as well. Nothing. After 20 minutes of frustration, my husband just used the old nut and said that he could change it out later if it bothered me. But it didn't. We moved on and forgot about it. Then, 2 months later, I was in the bathroom, alone, standing at the vanity, finishing my hair before heading out. And out of nowhere, something fell from above and hit the floor behind me. I caught a quick flash of movement in the mirror as it fell, but I didn't see what it was until I bent down to pick it up. And there it was. The missing nylon nut. Brand new. The same one that we had searched for 2 months earlier. But here's the thing. There was absolutely nowhere that it could have been stuck. There was nothing that it even could have fallen from. It just literally dropped from ceiling height as if it had just appeared. When it hit the floor, it spun like a top until I picked it up. I don't know. I just stood there, completely freaked out. I've had weird things happen to me over my 51 years, but this this was the weirdest thing yet. Even now, whenever I think about that moment, it still gives me the chills. Because where had it been for those 2 months? And how did it suddenly fall out of nowhere? Did I witness a parallel reality overlap with my cat? A few nights ago, I was woken up by a very strange and distressed meow. This wasn't unusual. My cat sleeps with me and hasn't been feeling well. But this meow? It was different. I immediately sat up because it sounded like she was about to throw up. So, in a panic, I nudged her off the bed to keep it from happening on the sheets. She ran to the end of the bed, and I heard her throw up on the floor. I sighed and started to get up to clean it when suddenly I heard another meow. I turned and I saw my other cat standing by my closed bedroom door, meowing to be let out. I walked over and I opened the door, but as I did, my cat suddenly took a few steps back, looking shocked and confused because on the other side of the closed door was the first cat. The same cat that had just been on my bed throwing up, inside the room. She was now outside. I stood there, stunned, thinking to myself, that's not possible. There was no way that she could have gotten out of the room. The door had been closed the entire time, and I thought, I don't know, maybe I was just tired. Still shaken, I decided to clean up the mess that I had heard just a minute before, except there was no mess. Both my husband and I had seen her. We had heard her puking, but there was nothing there. We both witnessed something impossible. Did our cat glitch? Did we experience a timeline slip? Or was something else at play here? Even now, I have no idea what happened. I think I found proof that our reality is more fluid than we think. This is my first time posting on this subreddit. I usually spend more time in the retconned sub discussing Mandela effects, but something happened to me about 2 weeks ago that I can't explain, and I'm wondering if anyone else has experienced something similar. The first glitch, I was waiting for a bus. I live in Korea now, and like usual, I was just looking around, watching cars, the street, and the asphalt where the bus markings were painted. A random bus pulled up and I looked at the back of the bus as it stopped. Then, as soon as the bus drove away, something bizarre happened. The asphalt that I had been staring at started to stretch. It was like reality itself was being pulled apart. Then, slowly, it contracted back to normal. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe it was a minor visual hallucination, but then it happened again. Before my bus actually even arrived, I saw the asphalt stretch and contract just like before. The second glitch was later that day. I was at home, looking at my computer monitor, the same screen that I'm looking at right now, and suddenly, in the bottom left corner of the screen, I saw the exact same thing happen. The image stretched and expanded vertically before contracting back. At this point, I knew that something was off. I've never experienced a glitch in the Matrix before, at least not one that I'm aware of. I've had plenty of Mandela effects, synchronicities, manifestations, and repeating numbers, kind of like angel numbers. But this was completely new. I even went to the eye doctor recently because I needed a new prescription for dry eye, but they told me that my vision was fine, just a little dry. So if it wasn't my eyes, then what did I see? The missing and then found and then shrunken bracelet. I've always been fascinated by glitch in the Matrix stories. I've read them, I've watched videos about them, and I've always wondered, how does it feel when something like that happens to you? Now I know. I've been moving into a new apartment since my relationship ended about a year ago. While packing, I remembered something. A bracelet that my ex had given me. It had broken a long time ago, so I put it in our safe for safekeeping. I was still annoyed about it because just days before it broke, I had it professionally cleaned by a goldsmith. There was blue paint residue on the stones from a t-shirt project. I first tried to clean it myself with a mini pipe cleaner brush. It fit under the stones, but it didn't work, so I had a professional restore it, only for it to break soon after. After that, I put it away in the safe and forgot about it. Months later, I remembered the bracelet and wanted to finally get it repaired, but when I checked the safe, it wasn't there. I tore the place apart. I even asked my daughter if she knew anything about it, but she never touched the safe. I started to doubt myself. Maybe my brain was tricking me? Maybe I had actually lost it? I wasn't sure, so I let it go. Now that I'm moving, I had to empty the safe completely. The first time I picked it up, I didn't notice anything. But the second time, I saw a small plastic bag inside, and inside that bag, a bracelet. At first, I didn't recognize it, but I took a closer look, and then my stomach dropped. It was the same bracelet. It had the same color pattern of red and white stones, and the same break in the exact spot where it had torn before, and the same design, only it had shrunk. I remember clearly. Before, the gaps between the stones were large enough that I could fit a pipe cleaner under them. Now, the stones were so close together that only a pin could fit. It was identical in every way, except for the size. But how? I showed it to my ex, and he just looked uneasy and said nothing. I feel like my brain can't handle the information. It's like I know something is wrong, but I can't explain what happened. Did the bracelet change size? Did reality shift? Or did I somehow enter a slightly different version of my life? I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you. But it is very, deeply unsettling. Odd structure in the sky. This happened to me years ago, but it's been stuck in my head ever since. I'm kind of wondering if anyone else has seen or experienced something like this. I was in Colorado on my way home after work, and I had gotten on a connecting bus after getting off the train in a smallish town named Green Valley Ranch. While on the bus and approaching a Walmart, I remember seeing a very angular, black and reflective object far to the south in the sky, just kind of floating there. It almost looked like a segment of a crystal. At first, I thought it may have been something on top of the Walmart, but as the bus moved, the object didn't move from its position in the sky. At one point, before turning to go north onto Tower Road, the object wasn't even above the Walmart anymore, perspective-wise. At the distance that it was, whatever it was, it must have been huge. I don't even have an accurate comparison for how big this object felt. There wasn't anything on the bus window either because it disappeared from sight as the bus turned. I don't think it could have been any weather phenomenon. I don't remember if it was a partly cloudy day or a clear sky day, but either way, it was way too rigid of a shape and difference in color contrast for it to be a cloud or anything similar. Part of me regrets not getting off the bus to investigate further, but I just remember thinking to myself, I'm going to get off the bus and discover that it's something just really mundane. I say that, but to this day, that memory is just stuck in my head. What was that in the sky? Is it possible to remember a time that you never lived in? This might be a long post, but I think I finally found a place where I feel this experience belongs. I'm hoping to gather some insight and maybe even connect with others who have had similar experiences, especially those drawn to the Victorian era. Ever since I was young enough to be aware of the world around me, I've been fascinated by Victorian history and antiques. As a child, I would spend hours looking through books and watching older YouTube videos about Victorian fashion, architecture, and culture. I was always a bit of a brooding kid. I read Bram Stoker in 7th grade, I loved cemeteries, and I admired Vincent Price. I also spent most of my free time writing poetry or watching old films. But there have been moments in my life that make me feel like this isn't just an interest. I truly wonder if I've lived a past life in this era. The first experience that made me question things happened in high school when I had a dream so vivid that I was convinced I wouldn't wake up. I was wearing a breathtaking 1860s off-the-shoulder ball gown with an intricate braided hairstyle. The ballroom was elegant, perhaps checkered tile, a long roll-out carpet, and dim golden lighting. As I walked through the room, a gentleman in a tweed suit approached me and bowed. I tried to see his face, but I couldn't. When I woke up, I immediately Googled the dress and hairstyle from my dream, and everything, down to the last detail, was historically accurate. I mean, nothing was out of place. Another time, a few years later, when I was an undergrad, I had another dream. This time, I was a little older, matching my real-life age at the time. I was in a beautiful dining and living space with salmon-colored walls, gilded accents, and elegant wooden furniture. Candles flickered on a long dining table where I sat surrounded by children, some my own and others friends of my children. I wore a high-collared sage green evening dress, not an elaborate gown, but something dressy for entertaining at home. I could see every detail. The way the candlelight glowed off of the furniture, the sweeping banister that led up to a second floor overlooking the dining area. Again, the historical accuracy was flawless. And again, I'd never seen this exact home, or these clothes, or this life before. The most recent experience happened within the last year. I went to an antique shop with a good friend. We both happen to be morticians, so the old soul factor is already strong with us. While wandering through the store, we ended up in the back where the more eclectic items were displayed, pieces that weren't categorized by era or type. Then, my attention locked onto something. I was immediately drawn to an old Victorian biscuit warmer. And the strange thing, I had never seen one before. Never in a book, not in a picture or in a museum, but somehow I knew exactly how to open it. My friend, confused by how it worked, was fiddling with it, trying to figure it out. And without any hesitation, I walked up and said, "It opens like this." And just like that, I opened it, as if I had used it 100 times before. Could this be proof of a past life? I have no explanation for any of these moments. They're too detailed to be imagination, too precise to be random. I'd love to hear from anyone else who's had experiences like this, again, especially if they relate to the Victorian era. Has anyone else ever just known things that they shouldn't? Was this a glitch in the Matrix or just a strange coincidence? I went to my lecture at the usual time yesterday. When I arrived at the building, I was really confused because it's normally packed. Another 200-person lecture ends 5 minutes before mine, so not only are those students leaving, but my classmates are also waiting to go in. But this time, the halls were completely empty. When I walked into the lecture hall, the lights were off, and no one was there except for 2 guys standing at the chalkboard writing out some problems. I asked them if our lecture was still happening, but they looked confused and said that they didn't know what I was talking about. Their class had just finished, and they were staying behind to practice some problems. I left and I checked my email to see if class had been canceled, but I couldn't find anything. Around 5 to 10 minutes after the usual start time, I emailed my professor and my teacher's assistant to ask if the lecture was still happening and if I had missed any announcements. A few hours later, they replied saying that the lecture had taken place as scheduled with no location changes. At that point, I started to feel like I was losing my mind. To be sure, I logged into my university's website and I double-checked the building and room number. It confirmed that I had been in the right place and the right time. Today, I went to my discussion section and I asked my classmates if we had lecture today. They all looked at me strangely and said yes. When I followed up by asking if the location had changed, they all said no. My TA then told me that I was the only person who had asked about any changes to the lecture's time or location. And just for some context, there are over 200 students in this class. Out of all of them, I was the only one who had experienced this. But here's the part that really messed me up. During discussion today, I couldn't focus at all because something strange happened. When my TA erased the chalkboard, instead of the chalk dust wiping off normally, it started dripping down the board, almost like it was wet. I blinked and looked around, but nobody else was reacting. No one seemed to notice that anything was wrong. Does anyone have any idea what could have happened here? Or am I actually losing my mind? My neighbor has a sixth sense for septic tanks. About 10 years ago, while I was still living with my parents, they were in the process of building a new home. Before that, we were living in a mobile home on a piece of land owned by a neighbor, not the same one from this story. The land had previously had a mobile home on it, so it already had electric, water, and sewer connections. When building a new home, there are all kinds of permits and inspections that need to be done. One of them involved the old septic system, which clearly wasn't up to modern standards and needed to be replaced. My dad ordered a new septic tank and planned to call a distant neighbor in a couple of days to have the hole dug. That neighbor, who I'll call George, owned a bunch of construction equipment. The next day, my dad drove out to the job site to do some work. He handled a lot of it himself, though some things were still done by contractors. Then, out of nowhere, here comes George up the driveway in a backhoe. My dad's jaw dropped. To this day, he still can't figure out how in the world George knew. He hadn't told anyone who knew George about the septic tank, and even if he hadn't yet called anyone out to come dig the hole, nor had he mentioned that a hole needed to be dug or that a new tank had even been ordered. The company that he ordered the tank from was a couple of hours away, and none of their workers would have known George. The tank hadn't yet arrived, so it's not like George could have driven by, seen it, and then assumed that a new hole needed to be dug. None of the inspectors who checked out the old septic system would have known George, and even if they did, they wouldn't have been told that a new tank had been ordered. Running heavy construction equipment takes a lot of fuel, and George lived a little over a mile away. It's not like he would have casually driven a backhoe all the way over just for fun. The only logical explanation that my father and I could come up with is that since this was around 2000 or 2001, our cordless phone was still analog. And I know for sure that it was because I used to walk around with it while talking to see how far I could go before it started to cut out. It is possible that George somehow picked up our phone call. The mobile home was temporarily parked about a half a mile closer to his place, and he was an avid ham radio and CB user with a very large antenna. George never did reveal how he knew that the hole needed to be dug, but he was a kind man and refused any payment for the work. In our neighborhood, people helped each other out without expecting money in return. Will I ever find out what happened to Mickey? When I was 2, my mom bought me a Mickey Mouse soft toy. He's about 20 centimeters tall. He came everywhere with me and was subject to a fair amount of abuse in the form of surgeries from one of my brothers. His tail was snipped and his arm was ripped off, and plastic eyes were smashed and broken off in places from a metal bed frame. Stuff like that. And he was stitched up countless times. As a result, he looked very much worse for wear and didn't have his original red shorts, but instead a blue knitted jumper and blue shorts from another toy. When I was 24, I was in my apartment packing my suitcase for my first ever plane trip. I was off the following day to Scotland with my then boyfriend. He was on his way to collect me for the evening and then take me back to my apartment the next day to finish packing, and we would head straight to the airport from there. I walked from my bedroom with Mickey, looking at him, and I said out loud, "Luggage or carry-on?" He looked back at me with his sad, half-broken eyes and floppy ears from where the cardboard holding them up had long since been surgically removed. I decided carry-on, of course, for my companion. This little Mickey plushie was such a constant in my life, through all kinds of trials and tribulations. He was always there. I wasn't going to subject him to some stuffy suitcase. I heard a knock at the door. It was my boyfriend, and so I tossed Mickey onto a pile of clothes sitting in my open suitcase on the floor. It was just temporary. But I distinctly remember chucking him there and then opening the door. The next day, the first thing I noticed when I got back to my apartment was that Mickey was gone. He was nowhere. It's been 7 years now, and he's still vanished. I live alone in an apartment building consisting of 4 units. Mine was on the top left. The one below me, on the bottom, housed a young Italian couple who kept to themselves, and the 2 on the right were completely empty, except for the builder/renovator who stayed there from time to time. No sign of a break-in, and anyways, who would steal a used-up Mickey Mouse out of all the things that were in my room? Another note, I moved out about a month later. He was gone. That Mickey was absolutely nowhere. I dreamt of him for a few months, genuinely mourning the loss of him. But even still today, I wonder, will I ever see him again? Was this just luck, or did reality glitch for a split second? This happened some time ago, but it's never left my mind. I've never talked to anyone about it before, and I thought that sharing it here would be the best place to do so. I was in an English class where the chairs were arranged differently than usual. Instead of being lined up in rows, they were all positioned against the walls. I'm explaining this so that you can understand how this happened. On that day, a person sitting next to me asked for a pen. Someone on the opposite side of the room offered to lend him one and threw it across the room. I guess he threw it a little harder than he intended because the pen flew straight towards the guy's eye. Based on its trajectory, It should have hit him directly in the face, but then something strange happened. The pen seemed to slow down in midair, coming to a complete stop right in front of his face before gently dropping into his hand. It never actually hit him. I just remember a girl sitting next to him looking in his direction with this shocked expression, like she had just witnessed something bizarre. Of course, it's possible that she was just reacting to the fact that it almost hit him. I never asked her about it, but this moment has always stuck with me. I keep wondering, was this just a weird coincidence? Or could this been some kind of face-saving or eye-poking protective glitch in the Matrix? Did I just witness a real-life magic trick in a gas station bathroom? This happened to me about a year ago. I had pulled into a gas station to grab a snack and to fill up my tank. Before that, I had made another stop and I used my debit card for a purchase. When I got to the pump, I got out of my car and took my wallet with me, and I opened it up to pay at the card reader. But my debit card was nowhere to be found. I pulled out every other card searching for it, but it was just gone. I had to use the restroom pretty badly, so I decided to take my wallet with me and figured I have to go back to the last place that I shopped to see if I left my card there. Inside the restroom, I set my wallet on top of the metal toilet paper dispenser while I used the toilet. It's important to note that my wallet is leather and looks like a small purse. It has a flap that comes down over the opening and locks in with a clasp. Inside, there are several slots to hold my card, and you have to undo the clasp to even open it, which makes what happened next completely unexplainable. After flushing the toilet, I grabbed my wallet off of the dispenser and I immediately heard something hit the ground. I looked down, and there, lying on the bathroom floor, was my debit card. I stared at my wallet, trying to make sense of it. There was no way that the card could have fallen out when I picked up the wallet. Even if I had somehow missed it when I was searching earlier, the flap had been closed and the clasp was still secure. It was as if the card had been underneath my wallet, and when I lifted it, the card was pushed off the dispenser and onto the floor. I was completely taken aback, but at the same time, I knew something strange, or maybe even magical, had just happened. I might have temporarily slipped into a parallel universe. Hello. First of all, I'm not a native English speaker, so I apologize for any grammar mistakes. I don't know what happened. I don't know if I dreamed it or if it was even real. I don't want to sound crazy, but I think that I, a 17-year-old female, may have accidentally and temporarily jumped into another dimension or parallel universe. My school is one of those that keeps students from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Each year, we take a one-day camping trip to our school's summer camp campus. From 5th to 9th grade, the trip lasts for 3 days. After 10th grade, only selected students who complete a specific course can return as camp leaders. Camp leaders help take care of the younger students and assist the teachers with organizing games. I am one of those camp leaders. I've been to that camp countless times, and I know it by heart. The camp has 2 sections, Mission and MIUs. Mission is the larger, more well-kept area, and our school always stays there. We never go to MIUs. Except for one night. I was in 6th or 7th grade, and my game group was playing a nighttime activity. The rules allowed us to go anywhere in the camp, except for a few restricted areas, including MIUs. But somehow, we got lost in the woods and ended up in what we thought was the MIUs section. Since we had never been there before, we were confused, and something felt off. The place looked exactly like Mission in size and layout, but everything was inverted, kind of like a mirror image. It reminded me of the Upside Down from Stranger Things. At first, we thought that we were still in Mission, but then we saw a cabin with a sign that said Alabama. And there was no cabin named Alabama in the Mission section. At least none of us had ever seen one. Still, we shrugged it off, assuming that we must be in MIUs. Somehow, we found our way back to Mission and we continued playing, and we never thought much of it after that. Years later, as a senior, I went back to the camp for the senior camp program. This trip was different. It was one last visit to the camp for all the seniors, whether they were camp leaders or not. One day, I told my friend Kate, who was not a camp leader, about my experience in MIUs when I was younger. She got excited and asked if we could sneak out to see it. Since I knew the way by heart by now, I agreed. We walked for about a half an hour and we finally reached MIUs, but it was completely different from what I remembered. This area was much smaller, the cabins were different, and the whole place looked run down. There was nothing about it that resembled Mission at all. Kate was disappointed, and so was I. Later, I told one of our teachers about my experience, and I asked about the Alabama cabin. He looked confused and told me that there had never been a cabin named Alabama in the entire camp, and he said I must have just dreamed it. But I couldn't accept that. The memory was too vivid. I even reached out to one of my friends who had been in my gang group that night years ago, and he remembered it just as clearly as I did. We couldn't have had the same dream, could we? Was it really just a dream? Or did something else happen that night? I'll probably never know, but if anyone has any theories, I would love to hear them. Did I glitch the universe by bringing a pen with me? I went out for groceries today, and I decided to bring a blue ballpoint pen with me. I needed it to write a get well card that I planned to buy along the way. When I arrived at the store parking lot and stepped out of my car, I immediately saw the exact same blue ballpoint pen lying on the ground right in front of me. I did a double take. At first, I thought that my pen had fallen out of my pocket, but that wasn't possible. I had just stepped out of the car, and the pen was too far away from me. Sure enough, when I checked, my pen that I brought was still in my pocket. I picked up the one on the ground and I compared them, and they were identical. Same transparent shell, same light blue Bic design. It was strange because I never bring a pen with me. It's not a habit. Yet, on the day that I decide to carry one, I find the exact same pen just outside my car. And to make it even weirder, I visit this store kind of often, and the parking lot is usually spotless. No trash, let alone a random pen lying on the ground. My wife was with me, and she thought that it was freaky as well. What would you do if blood kept mysteriously appearing in your home? This is a post that I never thought I'd be making. Let me give you some context. My roommates and I live in an older building that was renovated into a 3-bedroom apartment. Until November, there were 3 of us living here, but our 3rd roommate moved out to pursue an opportunity in a bigger city several hours away. Now, it's just my best friend and me. It's important to note that, despite the renovations, our building is old and has a strange layout. The 2 bedrooms my roommates use are in the very back of the apartment, while the kitchen, the living room, and the dining room and the bathroom are at the front. And my bedroom is in the middle. and my roommates have to walk through it to get to the common areas, so they pass through frequently. The first incident happened several months ago when our third roommate still lived here. Something unsettling happened. One night, I went into my bedroom to get ready for bed, and I noticed red droplets on the floor in a specific spot. Confused, I grabbed a rag and I wiped it up. Of course, I smelled it, and yeah, it was 100% blood. At the time, we simply reasoned that our third roommate, who had a pretty heavy flow, might have accidentally leaked while walking through my room. My best friend and I were a little freaked out, but we didn't want to embarrass her, so we let it go and never mentioned it. The second incident happened today, 3 months later. This morning, I woke up to blood drops in the exact same spot on my bedroom floor. But this time, there was no logical explanation. Even stranger, I had been cleaning my room yesterday, so I know for a fact that the blood spot was not there earlier. I left around 5 p.m. to eat with my family, and I got back around 10 p.m. I went straight to the bathroom to get ready for bed. I changed beside my bed and then got in. The blood spot was on the complete opposite end of my room, nowhere near where I had even walked. My best friend got home earlier and walked through my room to get to hers, but the blood spot wasn't in her usual path either. It was off to the side, in a place that neither one of us would have stepped. We have no pets, and we don't have a pest problem. I have no idea what to think, and I'm completely freaked out. What could this be? Did I just experience a time loop in my own house? I'm super freaked out right now. Earlier today, before my shower, I tossed the first half of my laundry into the washer and started the load. After I got out, I added the second half, including the clothes that I had just taken off, and started a new load. I always triple check that the hamper under my laundry chute is empty before running the water, and it was definitely empty when I started the second load. But later, when I went to go grab everything, the clothes that I had been wearing before my shower were somehow back in the laundry basket under my chute. I was so confused that I even told my sister about it while we were on the phone. It was completely bizarre. Feeling unsettled, I double-checked the basket just to make sure that I wasn't losing my mind. They were definitely the clothes that I had been wearing before my shower. Still, I dismissed it and went about my day. A little while ago, I randomly remembered what had happened and decided to go back downstairs to check the basket again. But this time, the clothes were gone. I came back upstairs and I found them sitting in my other laundry basket, clean and ready to be folded. I even smelled them, and they had definitely been washed. Have I been phasing in and out of different realities all day? This person asks that I ask you, my audience, for any helpful advice or suggestions if you have any. Where did the mysterious house in the woods go? If anyone has any experiences or knowledge related to this, please let me know. I really need to figure this out. When I was around 12 years old, my buddy and I went exploring in the woods near our homes. For some context, we knew these woods like the backs of our hands. Every path, every tree, every detail. We had explored it all. One day, as we were wandering, like usual, we came across a cupboard door, just a regular kitchen cupboard door lying on the ground. Curious, we flipped it open, and nothing was underneath. It was a little odd, but we moved on. Then, suddenly, things started to feel different. We began seeing plants and flowers that we had never seen before, some of which, to this day, I've never encountered again. The terrain no longer looked familiar. These woods aren't very big. It should have only taken about 5 minutes to reach the other side, but for some reason, we had been walking for much longer. Something felt off. My internal clock was telling me that we should have already reached the edge of the woods. And then, as if we had blinked, it appeared. A white house. It sat in the middle of a perfectly manicured lawn, a pristine square patch of grass in an otherwise wild forest. My friend and I froze. We had never seen this house before. It shouldn't have been there. But instead of investigating, we turned around and left. I don't know why. We weren't exactly scared, but something told us that we shouldn't be there. It's a decision that I've regretted for years. We went back later to try and find it, but we never could. We couldn't even find the cupboard door, which, for some reason, I feel was connected to this whole experience somehow. Again, if anyone has any theories, please leave comments below. I need to find that house again. I need to know what I saw. Did I experience a glitch in reality while taking my medication? Last Monday morning, I was running late for work. I rushed upstairs to take my medication before leaving. I have one of those daily pill organizers, so I opened the compartment for Monday. I dumped 3 pills into my hand and started heading back down the stairs. For reference, I take the same 3 pills every day. I have 1 huge pill, 1 small white square pill, and 1 small round orange pill. They're pretty distinguishable. Since I was in a hurry, I carelessly tossed the pills into my mouth while stepping toward the stairs, and then I heard one of them bounce down the stairs. It was clear as day. It happened the instant that I threw the pills in my mouth, so I knew I had dropped one. I quickly searched for it, but I couldn't find anything. No pill. Nothing. Even looked on the stairs and everywhere nearby. Since I was in such a rush, I decided to grab another one and deal with finding it later. As I walked back upstairs, I checked my tongue to see which pill I had dropped. And that's when I froze. All 3 pills were still on my tongue. I had never dropped one in the first place. I was confused, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I swallowed the pills and I told myself that maybe I had just accidentally kicked something down the stairs, like the back of an earring or a coin or something, at the exact same time that I took my medication. Just a weird coincidence, right? Well, 2 days later, my fiance found a pill on the stairs and brought it to me. It was my small, white, square pill, the exact one that I take every day. I never take my medication anywhere outside the bathroom, so there's no reason for one of my pills to be on the stairs. Our house is usually kept pretty spotless, and our stairs are black, so a white pill should have stood out immediately. Besides, I swallowed that pill. I saw it on my tongue in the mirror. So where did this one come from? Why did multiple abandoned shopping carts disappear at the same time? I've never posted here before, so I hope this is the right place for this. The other day, I was at the grocery store, Hannaford, for all my fellow New Englanders, when I noticed something strange. At first, I didn't think much of it, but the more that it happened, the weirder it got. I kept seeing abandoned shopping carts throughout the store. Not just 1 or 2, but 4 separate carts, each with a few random items inside and no owner in sight. These weren't the usual stepped away for a second situations, and they didn't look like the carts that are usually left behind for restocking. They were just completely deserted. I shop at this store regularly, and this never happens. At first, I brushed it off, but I kept passing by the same carts and noticed something odd. They weren't moving. No one was coming back for them. No employees were touching them. They just stayed exactly where they were. By the time I saw the fourth abandoned cart, I realized there was a pattern. It felt weird enough that I took a picture and posted it on my private Snapchat story as a funny, what's going on kind of moment. Then, I decided to go back and document the other carts, but when I went looking for them, they were all gone. I had passed by them multiple times and they never moved, but the second I decided to take more pictures, then they disappeared. And here's where it gets even weirder. After I posted about it, a friend replied saying the exact same thing had happened to him at a completely different store. He had also noticed multiple abandoned carts, went to take a picture, but they were gone by then. And that's what led me here. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? Did I run into a real dog, or was it something else? Last night, I was driving down the highway that runs through my town, heading toward the interstate. Out of nowhere, a dog appeared right in front of my car. I didn't even have time to react before I hit it with the right side of my vehicle. Shocked, I immediately pulled into a gas station about 200 feet down the road. When I got out to check my car, I found that one of my plastic panels had been punched in and my bumper was cracked. I ran back to where I thought I had hit the dog and saw it running away. It wasn't limping, it wasn't showing any signs of distress. It just kept running into the parking lot of a Christian high school, somehow getting through the gate and disappearing onto the school grounds. This afternoon, I pulled the footage from my dash cam. For some context, the highway that I was driving on is a wide 4-lane road with a turning lane in the middle and bright streetlights because of the high school and the nearby interstate exit. My dash cam records in infrared, so even in the dark, it picks up details. And what I saw in the footage completely baffled me. The dog didn't run into the road from any direction. It didn't appear from the sidewalk, and it didn't step into the median and then move into my lane. It just literally materialized out of thin air. One moment, there was nothing in the median, and the next, a medium-sized dog, maybe 20 to 25 pounds, was suddenly there, running. It wasn't sprinting, but it wasn't walking either, more of a half gallop. And then I hit it, going approximately 43 miles an hour. There was an impact. My car is physically damaged, and the footage records a loud bang. I mean, there's proof that I hit something. And yet, when I ran back to check, the dog was still running, completely uninjured, at the exact same pace that it had been moving before the collision. It was almost as if I had hit a ghost. I don't know. I have no logical explanation for this. I've reviewed the footage hundreds of times, looking in every possible direction, and there's no sign of the dog before it appears. I have no idea what happened to me. And for those wondering, as of the time of this recording, there is no dashcam footage available. Did I just meet a child that was never born? I recently visited my brother after not seeing him or his family for several years. He lives out of state and has moved around a lot for work. Since I was going to be in his town for a work conference, I called him up and asked if I could stop by. He said of course, and even asked if I could bring my puppy to stay with his kids while I was at the weekend-long conference. He has 3 kids, a 7-year-old girl, a 9-year-old boy, and a 13-year-old girl. These ages and numbers are important. On the morning of my conference, I arrived at my brother's house early, around 7 a.m. It was winter break, so the kids were home. When I walked in, my brother and his wife were awake, and the 3 kids were playing in the living room, but something felt wrong. Instead of the 2 girls and 1 boy that I was expecting, I saw 2 boys who looked to be around 9 and 10 years old, and 1 7-year-old girl. I hesitated for a moment. I could have sworn that my brother had 2 daughters and 1 son, not the other way around. But I hadn't seen them in 15 years and they moved around a lot. Maybe I was just misremembering. So I didn't say anything. I sat in the living room and chatted with my brother and sister-in-law while the kids played. Every now and then, they would run up to me, excitedly telling stories and playing with the puppy. One of the boys, who I knew was autistic, had a speech issue, and he kept getting playfully pushed by the other boy, who would cover his mouth as if trying to keep him quiet. It just seemed like typical kids horsing around. At one point, the 7-year-old girl took my hand and led me into the kitchen. She pointed into the backyard through the window and said, "This is where I'll take the dog to go pee-pee later." The 2 boys followed us into the kitchen. The back door opened to a staircase leading down to the basement. After a few moments, we all turned to walk back into the living room, but one of the boys didn't follow us. My dog stayed back too and started barking towards the basement stairs. I assumed that the boy had just gone down there and that my dog was barking at him. I stayed in the living room for a few more minutes while the remaining 2 kids played with the dog, then said my goodbyes and left for my conference. Before I left, though, we made plans to meet for lunch. At lunch, my sister-in-law casually mentioned that I hadn't met their oldest daughter because she had still been asleep when I was there. She said I'd get to see her on Sunday when I came back to pick up my dog. And I froze. I looked at them, completely confused. I said, "Wait, but I saw 3 kids this morning." My sister-in-law's face changed, and she looked genuinely confused. Then she said something that sent chills down my entire spine. "I had a miscarriage a few years ago." My brother shot me a weird look and said, "Stop talking about stuff like that." And I never brought it up again. Can objects momentarily cease to exist and then come back? This is the second time that something like this has happened to me. We were in the process of moving, and I had inherited a Rolex watch from my father-in-law. I placed it on the top shelf of a cabinet, and after that, never really looked at it much. A while later, my mother-in-law was coming to visit from out of town. Since it was her late husband's watch, I thought she might want to see it, but when I went to go grab it, it was gone. I ran my hand blindly across the top of the cabinet, dragging my arm from one corner to the other. Nothing. I got a chair, I climbed onto the counter, and I looked more carefully. Still nothing. At this point, I started accusing my wife of maybe moving it by accident. I tore the apartment apart looking for it, checking everywhere that it could have possibly ended up. The more I searched, the more frustrated I became. I started ranting, saying there's no way that a watch just grew legs and walked away. I know I put it up there. And then there it was, just sitting there, right where I had originally placed it. I have no explanation for this, and I cannot describe how deeply unsettled it makes me feel. What do you guys think happened? Was it the same cyclist or a bizarre doppelganger? This happened about a month ago in the northeastern United States where I live. Let me start by saying how much rage I feel when driving behind cyclists on major roads, especially during peak rush hour. And I don't mean people who rely on bicycles for commuting. I'm talking about the competitive, sunglasses and spandex wearing leotard warriors who are just out there messing up traffic for their sport. So picture this. I'm driving to the gym after work, crawling at 15 miles an hour below the speed limit, losing my mind behind one of these guys. Since I have nothing better to do, I take in every obnoxious detail. His bike was lime green. His outfit had ridiculous squiggly lines and two big bold X's on the legs, which reminded me of the X on Chopper's hat from One Piece. His jersey had Team Fubar written on it, which I later looked up. I guess it's a cycling team based in Los Angeles, which is nowhere near where this was happening. When, finally, he decides to turn off the main road onto a dead-end street beneath a small overpass. I was thrilled, triumphantly shouted to myself, "Good, because of you, this drive was really foobarred." I know, I'm hilarious. With my road finally clear, I hit all the green lights. I turned left onto a short bridge, and I eventually stopped at a red light after crossing it. This whole sequence, from the moment that I left him behind to stopping at the light, took maybe 45 to 60 seconds. And that's when I saw him, the same cyclist. He was waiting at the intersection on the adjacent bike trail. Same lime green bike, same Team Fubar jersey, and those same obnoxious big X's on the pant legs. I was completely caught off guard. There was no way that he could have possibly made it there before me. I never saw him after we parted ways, and a cyclist simply cannot travel that fast, not fast enough to beat me to that intersection. I figured maybe there was a hidden trail or shortcut that connected the dead-end road to the bike path across the river, but later I checked out that area, and there was no bridge. The only way across the water is the one bridge that I drove on way ahead of him. There's no possible route that allows him to get from the dead-end underpass to the bike path without passing me along the way. When I got home, I pulled up Google Maps to examine the area, and I confirmed that there was nothing. No trails, no hidden shortcuts, just water. My only rational explanation that I can come up with is that it was two separate cyclists from the same team, both with identical bikes and outfits, riding in the same area. But what are the odds of that? This happened in the northeastern United States, and from what I can find, Team Fubar is based in California. How big is their following out there? I'm pretty sure it was the same guy, and if it was, how the hell did he get there before me? I don't know. I have no clue. But one thing is for sure. My day was really foobarred. If you don't know what foobar means, you can just ask in the comments, and somebody will let you know, I'm sure. How did my friend's lost shoe appear in a locked car hours away? Back in 2010, my best friend came home from college for spring break, and we decided to go out for the night. Our hometown is tiny with zero nightlife, so our best option was to drive an hour away to the closest city. Coincidentally, my friend's sister lived in that city, so we planned to get ready at her place before heading out. I drove us there, we got dressed, and then I drove my car to the bar. Here's some important details. My friend had an eye infection, was on medication, and had to wear her glasses instead of her contacts. Also, she was going through what she calls a weird phase and didn't drink at all that night. Additionally, I wasn't drinking heavily either since I was driving. I just had 2 beers the entire night. We stayed at the bar for about 5 hours. The city has a naval base, so it's common to meet guys in the Navy when you go out. We chatted with a few groups of them throughout the night, and at closing time, we were talking to a pair of guys who were funny and entertaining, so we invited them to go grab some food at Whataburger just down the street. After eating, they said they needed to catch a cab to get back to their place. This was before Uber was popular. They didn't seem sketchy, so I offered to drive them. One guy sat up front with me, and the other sat in the back seat with my friend. I drove them home, they got out, and then my friend moved up to the front seat next to me. We headed back to her sister's place, and we changed into some comfy clothes and went to bed. We never saw her sister because she had already been asleep when we arrived. The next morning, while packing up, my friend suddenly realized that one of her shoes was missing. She had worn her only pair of black heels that night, and her only other pair was 4 hours away at college. We tore apart the apartment looking for it, and found nothing. I became obsessed with figuring out where that shoe had gone, so we checked my car, the parking spaces nearby, we went back to Whataburger, and we also went back to where we dropped off the two Navy guys. Still no shoe. At this point, my friend just shrugged and said, "It's fine, I'll just buy a new pair." But I couldn't let it go. It made no sense. But still, we had no choice but to move on, so we drove the hour back to my hometown. When we got back to my house, my friend grabbed her bag and her car keys from my car. Her car had been parked at my parents' driveway the entire time, locked. As we stood outside saying goodbye, she unlocked the passenger side door and immediately started freaking out. She turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "How did you do that?" I was clueless, so I walked over to see what she was talking about, and sitting right there on the front passenger seat of her locked car was her missing black high-heel shoe. We stood there in shock, trying to process what we were seeing. This shoe had been gone. We searched everywhere for it, multiple locations, including my own car. So how did it end up inside her locked car in a town that it never went to? For 14 years, we've obsessed over this mystery. At one point, my friend was convinced that I was just pranking her, while I thought that she was pranking me. We've told countless people this story, and no one has been able to offer any kind of logical explanation. At the time, we didn't know much about glitches in the Matrix or anything like that, but now, I'm certain that that's what happened. What do you think? Did my cat experience something unexplainable, or did I? This happened a few months ago, and I still can't explain it. It was about 4 a.m. I'm a night owl, and I went outside to grab something from my van. My cat, Comet, is an escape artist, so I'm always extra careful when opening the door. I made sure he wasn't anywhere near it before stepping out. I closed the door immediately behind me and I walked to the parking lot. There were no cats anywhere outside. I grabbed what I needed and then turned back toward the house. And that's when I saw a cat sitting on my porch. At first, I didn't think much of it. There's a stray that likes to hang around my apartment complex, so I thought it was just him. But as I got closer, I realized that was Comet, my cat, the same cat that I had just made sure was inside the house. For a second, I thought that I had to be mistaken. He's a gray tabby, so he's not exactly one of a kind. But then he meowed at me and let me pick him up. It was definitely Comet. I carried him back inside, and my family was just as confused as I was. No one had let him out, and for the next 2 days, he was acting really weird. I've experienced other unexplainable things before, but this was one of the weirdest. Did my cat somehow glitch out of the house? Did our hairbrush vanish, or did reality swap it? My husband has super curly, easily tangled hair and is very picky about his hairbrushes because of it. For the longest time, he only used one specific brush, a wet brand brush with a short wooden handle and boar-style bristles. Since we traveled a lot together for work, we were extra careful about keeping up with this brush. We saw it and used it every single day, and always made sure to pack it when moving between places. Then, one day, it just disappears, and in its place, a completely different hairbrush, one that neither of us had ever seen or owned. It was also a wet brand brush, but that's where the similarities end. This newer brush was larger, it was made entirely of black plastic, and it had bulbed plastic bristles, which my husband specifically hates using. We've never found the original wooden brush again, even after packing up and moving recently. We have no idea where this plastic brush came from or how it seemed to replace the one that we knew and used so well. I know this is not the wildest glitch story out there, but that wooden brush was such a constant in our lives that its sudden disappearance and replacement just feels incredibly weird. This next one feels very heady and almost feels like somebody's big crafted thought experiment. Bear with me on this, and if you have thoughts, feel free to let me know. What if every lifetime that we experience is just a temporary escape? Consider for a moment that you do exist. Cogito, ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. But your true physical existence is in an unknown place and time. Every morning, you wake up and perform a service for 13 hours. Maybe you're a trash collector, or maybe you're a network engineer. Whatever it is, your only purpose is to serve, either humans or machines. There are no stores. There are no sales. There are no teachers. There are no artists, because in this world there is no leisure. There is only work. At the end of your shift, you go home and slip into the pod recently vacated by the second shifter. The first shift rarely interacts with the second shift, only except to hand off tasks. In exchange for this life of endless servitude, with no days off and 91-hour work weeks, you're given something unimaginable. Pseudo-immortality. Godlike power. As you sink into your pod, you load into a new life, and in that life, you will live an entire lifetime. You'll have no knowledge of your real self, nor of any life that you've ever lived before. But when you awaken, you'll remember all of it. Every lesson, every moment. They are yours to keep until you return. And when you wake, you feel fully refreshed, ready to start another day. And so, each day, you do it again. At first, you choose the perfect life. Great wealth, unmatched power, flawless beauty, a utopia without war or suffering. And within a month, you'll be bored. So you'll begin to choose less certain circumstances, until eventually, you will make no choices at all. Because you realize the only true limit to your experience is your own imagination. In this way, you will live tens of thousands of full lives in your one lifetime. You are not immortal, but you are the next best thing. Am I the only one who saw this Zach and Cody moment weeks before it actually happened? This is the first time something like this has ever happened to me, and I'm still completely puzzled. It's not the craziest or the most exciting story in the world, but I just can't make sense of it. I've been trying to do some research to find answers, which led me here. So, here it goes. If you've been online in the past few months, you've probably seen that clip. It's a short scene from a popular kids show filmed about 15 years ago, where a reservation is made for a specific date in 2023. As the date approached, people got excited, and when the day finally arrived, social media was flooded with posts. I saw it everywhere, on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all with the captions that said, "Go tell Dylan and Cole Sprouse that their table is ready." Naturally, I was curious, so on the day of the event, I idly checked out Dylan Sprouse's Instagram to see if he'd acknowledged it. There was a black and white picture of him in an artistic pose, head down, and his comments were flooded with people saying, "Your table is ready." It wasn't particularly exciting, and he didn't post any stories or replies about it, so I decided to check Cole Sprouse's Instagram next. And sure enough, he had posted a screenshot of his comment section highlighting the sheer number of messages. I thought it was so funny, so I took a screenshot of it for later. I saw all of this in early November, but the actual date of the event? November 16. So when I saw people freaking out again on November 16, I was completely confused. I thought, wait, is this happening again? I went back to Dylan Sprouse's Instagram to find the black and white photo, but it was gone. Nowhere to be found. I thought maybe I had just mixed up the twins, but no. The picture just didn't exist anymore. And even stranger, people online were angry that neither of them were acknowledging the day from that scene from their show so many years ago. Until, just like I remembered weeks earlier, Cole Sprouse finally posted a screenshot scrolling through his comments, exactly like the one I had seen just a week or two before. At this point, I was determined to figure out what was going on. I searched Google, thinking maybe there had been a practice day where people flooded their accounts before the actual event, but found nothing. I thought maybe Dylan Sprouse had just wiped his Instagram, deleting the black and white picture. Again, nothing. I went to check my screenshot of Cole's post that I took weeks prior, and it was gone. Maybe I never actually took it, but I remembered it so clearly. I even recalled that I originally thought the restaurant was French, not Italian, but I can just chalk that up to a small memory slip. But the fact remains, I saw something happen weeks before it actually did. You might be wondering if I'm going crazy, and I don't blame you, but I'm not on any medications except for a nasal spray for sinus issues. I have zero history of mental illness. I don't do drugs, and I drink maybe just a few beers once a month. So there's no reason for me to have hallucinated or imagined this. I just need to know, has this happened to anyone else, or am I actually going crazy? One day, my friend and I went to pick up her son's dad at the time at his job, which was a big casino in town, and she left me in the car for about a half an hour. I remember the whole thing. I was just sitting in the passenger seat, alone. No one else was with me. I took one selfie on her phone. I never moved out of the passenger seat. They got back in the car together, and she never looked at her phone until we got back to her house. While she was checking her phone, she looks up at me and said, "Who are you with in my car?" I was confused. I said, "There wasn't anybody else in there. I was by myself the whole time you were inside." And she showed me the photo, and it was of me sitting in her driver's seat with a girl in the passenger seat next to me, smiling for the selfie. I said, "Yeah, I have no idea." I really had no words for a little bit. I said, "I don't know who that is, and I never changed seats." Not one of us know who the girl is, and still to this day we have no idea who is in that photo or how it got there. I was in the same outfit and everything from that day. We asked our friends if any of them knew the girl in the photo, but no one did. I know for a fact that I never changed seats, and I wouldn't get some random girl to get in the car and take a photo with me. The photo was on my friend's old laptop. It's still there, but every time I reach out to try and get her to send it to me, there's always some problem with the battery or the charger or something. It's very strange, and we still talk about it from time to time. We've had a few other weird experiences in the years as well, and it makes me wonder, what's happening? A few years ago, I had a general anesthetic for an operation to remove a non-cancerous lump from my hand. As I was being prepared, I was chatting away to the nurse. The hospital was a private one, although I was being done as an NHS patient. I chatted with the anesthetist and asked jokingly if he'd ever lost anyone. He said he hadn't, but there was always a first time for everything. I knew he was joking. The building was an old country house turned into a hospital, and I was talking to the nurse about whether it was haunted because I have a paranormal podcast. She told me that it was, by one of the dead lords of the estate that the house was part of, and was telling me about all the personal sightings that the staff had talked about to each other, and he was well known. All this as I was put under. The operation lasted 2 hours and was successful, apparently. I was brought back around, and obviously to me there was no sense of time. One instance, I was waiting to go under, and the next, I was being brought back. The same nurse was standing over me. As I was coming to, I said I was glad to be back and that I'd like to chat more about the ghost. She looked at me quizzically and asked what I was going on about. I mentioned our previous chat from before the operation, but she was adamant. She knew nothing about what I was talking about. She wasn't playing with me either. I could tell she genuinely didn't know what I was talking about. I was wheeled back to my room. Obviously, I was groggy for a few hours, but nothing felt right. Everything just felt off for a few weeks afterwards, and every now and then, I got a weird feeling that something had changed. As time went on, these odd feelings eventually subsided, but I still occasionally feel a little bit displaced in my surroundings. The ghost is allegedly that of Thomas Lister. I moved from New York City to Tirana, Albania about a month ago. The craziest thing to me is that dozens of times since I've gotten here, people keep literally walking straight into me. The footpaths here are 15 feet wide or more, and I'm usually the only one walking on them. I see someone approaching from about 100 feet away. I'm on the far right side of the path, and they're toward the center or on the far left. I'm walking a very straight line, being extremely predictable in my trajectory. Then, they'll just drift across the entire path, and by the time that we're within 5 or 10 feet of each other, they are directly in front of me, and one of us will have to step aside, or a few times they've actually bumped into me. I've had this happen from behind as well. I'll be the only person walking on a 15-foot wide path, and a jogger comes up behind me and runs right into me. As I was walking to a cafe just now, I was wondering why this keeps happening, and I decided that I was going to write a post about it here. And as soon as I thought about it, a little girl runs down a perpendicular path and smacks right into me. What on earth is going on? It's like a video game, and everybody's snapping onto the other player character's location. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this? It's not just a difference in cultural norms or spatial awareness or attempted pickpocketing or anything like that, I don't think. It's just some weird, subconscious phenomenon that keeps happening, repeatedly, for weeks. This person DM'd me some more information that includes, another thing that's been happening here is that if there's someone walking alone on an empty sidewalk and I'm coming up behind them, I'll simply veer to one side to go around, and they will, almost in lockstep, veer the same direction and agree so that I'm blocked. So then I'll go the other way around, and they'll veer that way exactly in line with where I'm going. Their back is to me, so I don't think it's intentional, and they're swerving all over the sidewalk, and it's exactly where I'm trying to go and exactly in step with me. This has also happened dozens of times since I've been here. I think I might need to just film it next time. This is another email submission from Rebecca. Hey Derek, I've never submitted a story here before, but I've listened to all of your YouTube videos. The glitch stories are my favorite, and they remind me regularly of my own glitch. So here it is. When I was in 6th or 7th grade, I got my first handheld gaming system, a Game Boy Advance. It had a pale and partially transparent blue-colored body with light gray buttons. I played 2 whole games on that thing, Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland and Treasure Planet. I loved playing Treasure Planet, and I spent weeks getting stuck on the same level. I don't remember which level it was, but it was about mid-game and involved pushing and pulling big boxes to get through a maze or something like that. There was a field trip one day, and I brought my GBA with the Treasure Planet game so I could play the game on the bus ride there and back. The bus that we took to this trip was a newer model, shinier, brighter yellow, and with those antenna-like side view mirrors. I remember this detail because it was the first time I had gotten to ride on a newer bus. I was sitting in the back of the bus, which means there were no students that were able to sit behind me. As soon as the ride was underway, I put on my headphones, turned on my Sony Walkman, and pulled out my GBA to avoid any and all interaction with any fellow classmates. Both rides went just as planned, and upon arriving back at the school, I put all of my tech away back in my backpack. Here's the glitch. As I was putting the GBA in my backpack, it slipped from my hand and skidded under the bus seat. I heard it hit the floor and then slide backward, even hitting the back of the bus. I reached under the seat to see if I could grab it, but I didn't feel it. So I get down on the floor of the bus and I look everywhere, in all directions. But it's nowhere. Just poof, gone. At this point, we were back at the school and I had no time to ask around or anything, and my teacher had no sympathy when I told her that I had lost something on the bus. Fast forward about 2 years or so, I had forgotten all about this, having acquired other hobbies and interests. I was sitting on the regular bus that normally took us to our houses. This bus was an older bus and had the same number that it always had since I started riding this route. For some reason, I had this urge to look between the wall of the bus and the seat. I saw something down there, and I reached in to see what it was. And as I pulled it out, I felt a sudden shock wave of nostalgia. My fingers recognized the feeling of those buttons even before I saw what it was. I thought, oh man, some poor kid lost their GBA on the bus. But then I saw it. It was mine. The same light blue transparent body with gray buttons, and the same Treasure Planet game cartridge in the back. With some apprehension and some utter disbelief, I turned it on. The batteries were still good somehow after more than 2 years, and I loaded into the same level that I had been stuck on for weeks. Whenever I think of this, I'm just like, how the heck? Where did my GBA go for 2 years? How did it end up on a completely different bus with good batteries? I'm 32 years old now, and I remember this glitch very often. At some point, shortly after that GPA stopped working altogether, as if wherever it went to for those 2 years sort of preserved it and the batteries. But then when it came back, those 2 years of use that it would have been through had it not disappeared just caught up with it all at once, if that makes any sense. I wish I had kept it. I'm really nostalgic, so I bought a new one modded with a USB-C charging port and got my hands on the Treasure Planet game. And yes, I'm still stuck on that same level even now. Thank you, Rebecca. Hi, I hope there's an explanation for this, and if so, please tell me. I was taking a shower a few days ago and kind of just doing it on autopilot when my view changes to unlocking a door and I seemed much taller, and it felt like almost a dream. It didn't feel real, but once it was over, I didn't feel right. It was like I was spectating my brother for a second, because he's fairly tall, I'd say, 6 feet, and I'm about 5 feet, so there's a huge difference, and this has weirded me out, and I'm not really sure if there's an explanation for this. I mean, I hope that there's a reasonable explanation, but as for now, it really just felt like I was spectating for a few seconds. If anyone can explain a reason for this that would make me feel better for now, I would appreciate it, because I don't know what just happened. We have a helpful person in the comments that says, a nice, hot, relaxing shower or bath expands your blood vessels and can drop your blood pressure to the point of near lightheadedness and fainting. During vasovagal syncope, an out-of-body feeling isn't uncommon at all. It sounds like your astral projection during that was a bonus. This strange thing happened to me and my mom. For me, it happened last year during midnight. Past 12 a.m., my room was filled with this smell of food that was well cooked. I don't know how to describe this, but my entire room was just full with it. It felt very strange because my whole family was sleeping and every door and window was closed. Another incident happened just last week, and this one to my mom. She says she felt the smell of fresh, sweet banana chips during the same time, just after midnight. The smell was all over the house, she says, and she even got up and searched the kitchen to make sure that no one was cooking. And these particular banana chips are a very traditional dish, which are only cooked during festival seasons. In November of 2024, I had a hair appointment to dye my hair. My cousin, who usually does it for me, was handling it again. This time, I was switching to a vibrant shade of pink. Since I have a lot of thick hair, we realized that we needed 2 more boxes of dye. You can usually find this brand at Walgreens, so my mom left to go grab 2 more boxes. She FaceTimed me from the store, but they didn't have it. So she headed to Kroger, which is a major grocery store chain in the South. A little while later, she called me again, but she had only found 1 box. Since Walmart was nearby, she decided to check there too. And that was that, until about 35 minutes later, when she came home in a panic. She had lost her phone. My mom misplaces things a lot, so we immediately searched the car inside and out, but it wasn't there. I checked its location, and it showed as being in the Kroger parking lot. Since it was just a block away, I let her use my iPad to track it, but when she got there, she couldn't find anything. Luckily, she had insurance and was able to order a replacement because we had to drive out of state soon to pick up my uncle for Thanksgiving. Our city doesn't have a major airport. She got her new phone just in time. Fast forward to about 2 weeks ago. She was deep cleaning her room when she suddenly found the lost phone sitting on her dresser. Keep in mind, the tracker had last placed it in a parking lot at Kroger, and the last time she used it was also inside that very same store. Here's where it gets even weirder. My mom had never owned an iPhone before this one, and it definitely wasn't mine. I was holding mine when she found hers on her dresser. She had searched everywhere for it, including her laundry, under her bed, under and over everything, and yet somehow it randomly appeared on her dresser weeks later. Here's another odd detail. My mom loves fun, colorful phone cases, while I prefer simpler ones. When she lost her phone, it had a giant blue case with flowers all over it. But when she found it, it was an old glitter case that she hadn't used in a long time. When she turned it on, the lock screen was exactly how we left it after shutting it off, just in case someone had stolen it. Even stranger, the phone showed signs of water damage, even though my mom is always careful not to drop it or get it wet. Can anyone explain this to me? This happened a few weeks ago. I was feeling hungry and fancied some tuna mayo. I'd gotten the tin of tuna out of the cupboard and went to the fridge to get the mayonnaise out. There was a bottle with about half of the mayonnaise left in it, but no other bottles of mayo. I took the mayo out and I mixed it with the tuna, and I put the bottle back in the fridge. I made a note to get some more mayonnaise the next time I went shopping for groceries after I got paid. The next day, I go into the fridge and suddenly there was an extra bottle of unopened mayo in the fridge in the door shelf right next to the milk. I wondered if at first I had just missed it, but this was a huge bottle of Hellmann's mayonnaise, which was located pretty much right in front of my face. The fridge had been opened numerous times so that I could grab the milk for coffee and for other things, and I definitely would have spotted it before. The only people at my place at the time was myself and my mom. I mentioned it to my mom, and she was just as stunned as I was, as she hadn't been out either, and she had also been in the fridge numerous times. I joked to her that I finally had a glitch in the matrix, and she agreed. Now if only I could do that with money as well. This happened to me at the start of December. I just had to post this somewhere else because it's just so wild to me and my entire family. I never expected that something like this would actually happen to me. About 20 years ago, I was gifted a set of painted snowmen Matryoshka dolls. As you might know, they are nesting dolls that fit inside each other, and there's one design per size. This year, I went to bring it out of storage for my Christmas decorations. In one of my bins, I found a loose top to one of the inner snowmen. That's odd, I thought. I never keep them loose like that. Shrugging it off, I grabbed it out of the box. And this one particular size was in a completely different box than the rest of the set. I found the item, and when I went to open them to replace the top with the bottom, it was already inside. I had a complete set of these exact same snowmen already. I know that I don't have two sets of these nesting dolls. They were a gift and they were hand-painted. I was shocked. The two snowman tops are almost identical and are the same exact size. There's absolutely no feasible explanation for why I now have two. Someone in another thread pointed out that the copy is not identical, which only baffles me even more. My theory is that an artist cannot replicate painting perfectly, so it couldn't have been an exact copy. Whichever universe this other piece came from, I can only imagine that the me from that universe is incredibly confused and missing a top. The discrepancy is that on the original, the scarf rides up onto his chin, and on the imposter, there's a gap. The duplicate is also missing a button, which makes no sense as the rest of the set have all 3 buttons painted on. There are also other very minute details that don't match up as well. This is absolutely insane. We've been buzzing about this for days and we can't stop thinking about it. I just thought I would share, since this is completely unexplainable. I've been having surreal dreams for months now. Last night, I think that dream me finally realized that she's in a dream. Sometimes, when I dream, I'm aware of my waking reality, and other times, it's like I'm living in a completely different world as a completely different person. In my dream, I had this thought that time isn't linear, it's fragmented. I was trying to explain it to my mom. I told her, "You know how time moves through your fingers like grains of sand?" And then I mimicked the motion of holding sand, letting it slip through my fingers. She nodded, saying that she understood, and then I threw the imaginary sand into the air and started plucking bits of it out. It's not like it's slipping away. It's in fragments, and I'm simply picking them out. Now, awake, I have a theory. Dream me is realizing that every time she wakes up, she's somewhere else living a different life and doing different things. Another theory? Maybe I'm just seeing premonitions of the future. I've had this kind of wild idea that somewhere in the future, I'm trapped in a tesseract, trying to send messages to myself in the present. And the same phrase keeps echoing in my mind, something that I feel deep in my bones. Chase love, not knowledge. But chasing love is hard. I'm disenchanted with it after a situationship that kind of messed me up. Not because it was toxic, but because I wanted it to work so badly, and it just didn't. I nearly lost my mind trying to accept that I wasn't wanted, clinging to someone who didn't see a future with me. But knowledge, theories, ideas, logic, and the mysteries of the universe? That's enchanting. And also slowly driving me mad. The more I dig, the worse it gets. I think it's doing something to me subconsciously. I feel like I might be on a slippery slope. In last night's dream, the military was moving into my neighborhood, drones and all. I know this is a reflection of real life. I live in California, and lately I've seen more military helicopters. There's been stuff happening. I have this overwhelming urge to escape reality. I think that's why I'm obsessing over my dreams, why I study magic, parallel realities, quantum jumping, even ghosts, and God. Anything other than the possibility that things in the real world are about to go south. Does anyone have any thoughts or advice? I had a weird one happen to me driving to work the other day, and I'm still trying to rationalize it. I'd gotten off my exit for work, and the light had just turned green. "Let's Hear It for the Boy" was playing on the radio. I glanced at the clock as the light turned green, and it said 7:22. I'm midway through the intersection, and I hear a line in the song repeat that's not supposed to repeat. I glanced at the radio again, kind of instinctually, and noticed that the clock now says 7:26. 4 minutes later, a spontaneous headache started happening. Luckily, my job is 2 minutes off of my exit, so I was able to park fairly quickly, but I felt dizzy, and my head ached for those 2 minutes. I have no idea what happened to those 4 minutes that I apparently spent in the intersection, or why that line in the song repeated, but it's definitely one of the most trippy experiences I've ever had. Has anyone else ever had anything like this happen to them? This next one was submitted by Daniela to derekwebersubmissions@gmail.com. She says, "Hi Derek. A couple of months ago, you featured my past life glitch on your podcast. Thank you. I have 2 other glitches to share, and both of them involve washing for some reason. 2 days ago, I noticed 2 small, dry bloodstains in the middle of my cushion. I must have scratched myself or something. No big deal. I took the cushion to the sink to apply a stain remover before tossing it in the washer. To be sure that I wouldn't leave anything out, I checked the edges and I flipped the cushion over. There was nothing on that side, so I flipped it back, and what the hell? Where did those bloodstains go? I didn't even take out the remover from my cabinet at that moment. I was flipping the cushion all over, up and down, back and forth, and I couldn't for the life of me find those small, dry bloodstains. They were just gone." The second glitch happened when my new chair arrived. It came as an upholstered seat with 4 separate legs. After screwing the legs on, I put a felt furniture pad of the exact size on each leg. I turned the heavy chair around and moved it to its designated spot, thinking how smoothly and silently it glided across the floor. I grabbed the empty plastic bags from the floor and went out. When I arrived home later, I took off the dress that I had been wearing all day and tossed it in the washer. The next morning, I added clothes from the laundry bag and I turned the washer on. While taking the laundry out, I noticed something dark at the bottom of the drum. I reached in and I realized that it was a felt pad stuck inside. But how? I went to check the new chair and instantly noticed that the glide felt stiffer than the day before. And sure enough, 2 pads on the left were missing. I found the package of felt pads and there were 4 empty circles, so I must have used all 4 of them. I thought, okay, maybe I bumped the chair when putting it down and one just got stuck to my dress. But 2 of them? They were pretty sticky, and they don't just fall off that easily. It took some effort to remove it from the drum. Plus, after assembling the chair, I went for lunch and I checked myself in my large, full-body restroom mirror. I believe I would have noticed a black felt pad stuck to my dress. I didn't move or even touch the chair after getting home. I live alone, and that 4th pad was never found. Thank you for considering my stories. Happy New Year to you and all of your listeners. Danny. Hi all. Debating on posting this because I honestly don't even know if it's really a glitch in the Matrix kind of story, but it is something that till this day I have no explanation for. So here it goes. Every morning, my mother would walk me and my sister to school. It took about 18 minutes to finish the walk. During our walk, our aunt and cousins would usually accompany us since we all attended the same school, and this was in the early 2000s. So during that time, my mom was babysitting a relative's baby, and she would often have a stroller. My mother also had a habit of recycling plastic bags, the ones that you would usually get at the store. And that morning, she had a plastic bag with a few random things in it, including her keys. Her keys were very distinct and kind of heavy, as it had collected a few keychains over the years, one of them being a square keychain that acted like a small picture frame. I distinctly remember almost approaching the school when my aunt told my mom, "Watch out, your keys are falling out of your bag." Now, The bag was attached to the handle of the stroller and it was easily visible. My mom paused, grabbed the bag, and saw that specific frame hanging out of the bottom of the bag. At first, we thought the keys just tore the bag up, but upon further inspection, we realized that the rest of her keys were sitting inside the bag while that one keychain was going through the bag, making the smallest hole enough just for that keychain part to fit. At this point, we were running late to school because we were literally in the middle of the sidewalk trying to figure out how the keychain went through the bag without tearing it. We looked at the side of the bag to see if maybe it had made a slash through it, but nothing. The bag was completely intact, and the only tear that it had was that tiny hole just big enough for the little skinny chain to pass through. It honestly spooked us, and my mother kept it like that for days. She showed a few friends and family members, and no one was able to figure out how this was possible. Now, I've always been very skeptical of many things, and I've always been that person to have scientific or rational explanations to things. But this has always stuck with me, and I honestly don't have one. Yesterday, I think I experienced my first honest-to-goodness glitch in the Matrix, and it's been messing with my head ever since. I've been a lurker for a while now, but never had anything to contribute until now. Typically, I come to work at 0700, and most of the others come in about an hour later. I keep an eye on the lobby until the window is open, the shades are drawn until 0800, and I do so via the camera system. When you enter the building, there's an outer lobby and then a second inner lobby after going through the glass doors between the two lobbies. The window is made of bulletproof glass and the door is secure, so you have to use your fob to enter or be buzzed in. The only reason I keep an eye on the lobby is to simply let the other employees in that show up after me. My work bestie, L, comes in a little after 0800 each day. I checked the cameras and watched L enter the lobby from the outer lobby. I watched her walk through the glass doors. She was wearing her yellow/green puffy coat, carrying her canvas bag and her purple paisley lunch bag on her right arm. She used her right hand to swipe her fob and enter the building through the secure door. I heard it open. Of note, she has the same routine each day. She comes into the area where they have their desks and I have my office. She turns on a particular light, punches in at the computer located at the window, and then she sets her stuff down on her chair at her own desk. I was hanging out by my office door, chomping at the bit to tell her something, but she never came through, like for quite some time. I thought to myself, maybe she went to see E first thing. He was looking for her. I sat back down at my desk and continued working, and I watched her via the camera. She's in the outer lobby. She comes through the doors from the outer lobby into the lobby. Everything is the same, except for her coat. She now has on this reddish, pinkish coat, but her path, her movements, and her bag and her lunch bag are all the same. I know that something didn't happen where the cameras just started playing old footage from a prior morning. All of my other views, I have 10 views at once throughout the building, mind you, were also running normally. I haven't looked back at the footage to see if I see her twice again, but I do have a hunch that I will only see her enter once this time around. It was so trippy because I know I watched her walk in that first time in that greenish-yellow puffy coat. My mind just kept coming back to this throughout the day, and I've been thinking on it, so I thought I would share. This one's a little glitchy and a little paranormal. Everyone has their ghost, and this one's mine. But it's strange because I don't know how it could be a ghost. I was 17 at the time at my grandparents' house for the summer in Lewis, Delaware. Their house is a 55-plus neighborhood with all new houses. Therefore, there's no way that it could be haunted. I had the second floor all to myself, which was a bedroom, a living area, and a bathroom. The house had great plumbing and heating and electronics, so there was no way that the house would shake. And by the way, my grandparents were there, so there was no way that the laundry machine would be on at this time of the night. I was sleeping in my bed, and out of a dead sleep, I woke up, leaned forward, and stared at a painting on the wall. I don't know why, but I just stared at this painting. Just a few seconds later, the painting fell straight to the floor. The lamp, the alarm clock, and the small dresser next to my bed flew about 3 feet forward and banged loudly on the ground. I immediately hopped out of bed screaming. I ran to the light switch and I turned it on. I turned around to look at the situation, and yes, the picture was still on the floor and all the stuff was still on the floor too. I stood there in shock, waiting for it to not be real, but it was. After calming down, I assessed the situation. The back of the picture, where it hangs on the nail in the wall, was made out of cardboard, and it looks like it just ripped down through the picture like it was too heavy. And below the picture was the power outlet, which has the clock and the lamp plugged into it. And the cords, I would assume, must have been wrapped around the dresser or nightstand, which resulted in everything flying. But the biggest mystery of all that I haven't been able to solve here is why did I shoot up straight out of bed and stare at the painting in the first place? It seems silly, but possibly my first real glitch, and I tend to be a very uncertain person, so the fact that I'm so sure about this says a lot. Last week, I bought a multi-pack of prawn cocktail crisps. I thought there were some crisps at home already, but thought they were Ridge Cut multi-pack of different flavors, and I was craving prawn cocktail. I went to put them in the rack where we keep the, I'm just going to call them chips because crisps is awkward for me to say. I went to put them in the rack where we keep the chips. There was already a multi-pack of prawn cocktail chips there, and no Ridge Cut that I had remembered. I had a conversation with my mom, and if I recall correctly, it was about how I had purchased 2 of the same packages of chips. At minimum, she was there and acknowledged me putting the second pack of prawn cocktail chips there. And the next day, 1 multi-pack of prawn cocktail chips, and the previous Ridge Cut multi-pack was there again. My mom remembers the conversation when I put the second pack of prawn cocktails next to the first, but she remembers it as me putting them with the original pack of Ridge Cut. I remember it as us both commenting on the 2 multi-packs of prawn cocktail. I think that she low-key just thinks I'm losing it and is being polite, but I'm so sure about what I saw. I'm not sure about many things, but I'm as sure as can be about me putting the second pack of prawn cocktail chips next to the first. And for what it's worth, it was an incredibly high-stress week, and I'm wondering if stress can trigger these glitches to happen, as I don't really believe that I simply just didn't notice properly. It's been about a week since this has happened, and I still can't get over it. I've been following this subreddit for a while and experience frequent small glitches, but I thought you guys would really like this one. I have a photo, and I know it doesn't technically prove anything, but it was a weird moment. I went to my friend's mom's house last night, and she made a pudding dessert that she knows I love. She also makes a homemade whipped cream and buys walnuts to put on top for those who like them. I love them, and I always make sure the whole dessert is covered with them. Luckily, there were some leftovers, so she sent me home a piece in a Tupperware. She even put some whipped cream in a Ziploc bag for me to use. Tragically, I forgot to grab any walnuts to take with me. I opened the fridge today and I pulled it out. I put the whipped cream on top and I sat down to watch a show and enjoy my dessert. I took my first bite and I had the distinct thought, man, this is really missing the walnuts. I looked back up at my show while I was chewing, and when I looked back down at my dessert to take my next bite, there were 2 pieces of walnut sitting right on top. It's such a weird glitch, and it really feels like I just thought them into existence. My only issue is that I didn't manifest any more. This happened yesterday while I was working. I work at a hospital, so when it's time to bathe my patients, my Apple Watch goes in my pocket along with my AirPods and my phone. 45 minutes later, I'm leaving my patient's room and I go to put my watch back on and I realize it's missing, and so is my phone and my AirPods. I go back into the patient's room and I look around, but I don't see any of my things. I retrace my steps and go into other patients' rooms. I look through the drawers at the nurse's station. My coworkers and I are now looking everywhere, and I'm on the verge of tears because those things are my lifelines and I don't have the money to replace them. I remember I brought my MacBook that day, so I was able to ping my phone, and sure enough, all 3 items were in the first patient's room, neatly stacked on the bottom of the bed frame. Now, I would have never put them anywhere near where they could fall and land where they did, because they would break. And where they ended up on the bed frame, I would have heard them fall, and they wouldn't have fallen and landed so neatly. It was very bizarre, and I'm trying to come up with a logical explanation, but I just can't. This person includes an edit that says, some hospital rooms do have cameras. This particular room had a removable camera at the time due to the patient being confused so that someone could keep an eye on them at all times. They do not have recording capabilities though. The CNA, which is my job, to patient ratio at my hospital is anywhere from 1 to 6 or from 1 to 12, and the nurse to patient ratio is anywhere from 1 to 4 and 1 to 6, so I cannot be in every single room at once. So sometimes the cameras are essential for patient safety, and it's very legal or we wouldn't do it. So let's all just relax. Someone that my dad knows owns this small building. He's planning on selling, but it hasn't yet. Since it's close to my and my friend's house, we go to the downstairs area there, which is actually pretty nice apart from a few spider webs. The floor is made of carpet and it's pretty big. We go down there to play dodgeball sometimes. We used to use this red ball that I've had since I was like 7, but eventually it ripped, so we got a new one. One day, we were playing and someone threw the ball into the kitchen area and it bounced off the fridge. I went inside since I was the closest, but it was gone. If it bounced off the fridge, it would have hit the wall across from it, which has nothing that it could have gone under or around. We decided to continue to look for it, but we couldn't find it anywhere. We even checked the cupboards, the drawers, under the fridge. It was just gone. So we look around the building because it might have found its way into another room somehow. But nothing. We still joke about this, and every once in a while, we still go there, but we've yet to find that particular dodgeball. I was sitting in my living room recliner, working on a crochet project, intermittently using a yarn needle, and for those who don't know, it's similar to a sewing needle but larger and more blunt. When not using the yarn needle, I would set it in this small tray that I had sitting on the end table next to me so that I wouldn't misplace it or lose it in the chair. At one point, I reached for my yarn needle and I noticed that it was gone. I assumed that I had just set it in my lap by mistake, So I checked all around my lap, the seat under me, and down into the sides of the chair. I stood up to shake out the blanket that was covering me, but still couldn't find it. It was just gone. I went to my craft room to get a different needle, and when I opened my storage container, I found the one that I had just misplaced moments before. I know for sure that it was the same needle because this one had a distinct shape and it was part of a set of which I only have one. All 5 needles, each a different size and color, were in the container. And I know for a fact that I don't have any extras of that set. I was really glad not to have lost it, given that I only have that one, but it was baffling to have set it down in one place, lose it, and then find it somewhere else moments later. Alright, so before anyone says I'm crazy, my partner saw the same thing but didn't seem as weirded out by it as me, so here it goes. I just hope there's a rational explanation, but there isn't any that I can think of. I have an office in our home that I spend most of my time in. Usually, my partner knocks on my door when they want to pop in to say hi, or if they need something from me, and we have 2 dogs. The little one usually likes to pop in my room once I open the door to say hi as well, and I always laugh and I give him a pet and bask in his cuteness. My partner asks if I'm going to bed soon, and I say yes. My dog is still in my room as I was blocking the door and my partner is standing in front of the door, so my dog would need to pass through both of us unnoticed to end up outside of the room. As I let him know that I'll be in bed soon, as I was pretty busy at the time, and I could quickly close the door since it can be tough for me to focus again after I'm disrupted, I can hear and feel my dog playing right behind me. I close the door and I quickly look behind me. I sit down and I look around to see what my dog is up to, but he's nowhere to be seen. Mind you, this office isn't very big, as we live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, though I know in my head that I would have felt him go under my leg and my partner would have seen him leave as well. So I start looking around the office, checking everywhere. Since he isn't very big, he could be hiding. I then get a bit worried and I yell into the hallway, "Babe, have you seen the little dog?" And she says, "Yeah, remember, he went into your room." So I go back to my room, but he still isn't there. Then I walk outside the room again, now even more worried, and he's suddenly just sitting next to the bed, but being very, very still. I tell my partner what happened, expecting her to be just as freaked out as I am, but she just looks confused, not scared. Nowhere near as unsettled as I felt in the moment. I say, "That had to be some kind of glitch," and she just nods, casually agreeing like it's no big deal. And what makes it even weirder, in the background I had a video playing, which was stories about glitches in the Matrix. I just sat there, pale-faced, questioning my sanity, trying to figure out how my little dog ended up outside of my office. This probably isn't even the craziest story out there, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since last week. Eventually, I turn off the TV, shutting off the glitch stories, hoping to put the whole thing out of my mind, but I can't. And this isn't even the first time something like this has happened to me, but it is the first time that someone else saw it too, even if they barely reacted. It feels good to get this off my chest because, honestly, I have no explanation.